Meanwhile, the president of the Democratic Republic of Congo has called for a national mobilization against the aggression by M23 rebels. President Felix Tshisekedi made the remark as the DRC celebrated the 62nd anniversary of the country's independence on June 30. For more on these latest occurrences, we're joined now in studio by Nixon Katembo, my colleague from Channel Africa, producer and African Affairs analyst. Nixon, thanks so much for coming out at this time to talk to us. So, several issues. Let's just first start with M23 rebel activity and the ongoing attacks against UN peacekeepers. Just give us a sense of what exactly is happening there.
What is happening is a sustained attack by the M23 rebels. As Madam Bintou Keita, the UN Special Representative in the Democratic Republic of Congo, mentioned at the UN Security Council meeting on Wednesday. And for her coming out with such a diplomatic language of saying that they operate like a conventional army, to me it confirms earlier claim by the government of the DRC and local sources, particularly with civil society organization on the ground in areas like Bunagana, saying that M23 rebels are being supported and financed by neighboring countries, mainly Rwanda, and in Uganda also have been added to the fold in the latest development in the area. And this is not surprising to me, because I know for the fact that Makenga, who is leading the M23, have his own headquarters inside Rwanda in a place called Kabatwa. And Kabatwa is just between near the volcano of Karisimbi on the Rwandan side, and right down, if you not know geography of the area, is a Bigogwe military camp which harbors Rwandan special forces. So troop movements in that area is well known for those of us who know the area too well and the topography of the area, and the crossing inside the DRC is always a matter of time for them to carry out heavy artillery. And you would recall that, you know, for any conventional army to have, a rebellion rather, to have such a weaponry which is registered by a conventional army, that tells you how much the kind of support that the M23 have been getting from these neighboring countries.
Nixon, let's talk about that. The presence of what is said to be Hutu and Tutsi rebel leaders and groupings within the Democratic Republic of Congo, as you mentioned, Rwanda and Uganda, in terms of their complicity over the years, but particularly the support of M23. We know that Uganda went into a military operation with the DRC to deal with rebel activity on the border with Uganda, but not to have this accusation of complicity by both with regards to M23. How does that overlap occur? But most importantly, just to share with us a little bit of the genesis of the M23 rebel leader and how he came to be in the position that he's in.
Certainly, you have to go back to history of how the M23 were formed. I mean, this is a continuation of the invasion of the DRC since 1996, and then the subsequent formation of the RCD Goma and the RCD Kisangani, which are both from mother rebellion of the RCD, which was formed immediately after Kabila, the senior, the father, said to the Rwandan troops to say, no, now you have to return home, after they have aided him to capture power in Kinshasa in 1997. So it's not surprising what is happening in the area. You would recall that after the RCD failed to capture power and the country was divided along different rebellions, Uganda and Rwanda fought a war in Kisangani, and that war was fought in the month of June. to my memory, Congolese are still reeling from that war where people lost their lives and some were buried in Kisangani. So the different factions of rebellions did not start today, where you would recall that RCD Kisangani was supported mainly by Uganda, including Jean-Pierre Bemba's rebellion of the MLC. Then you have the RCD Goma, which was supported by Rwanda, of course picking up a couple of Congolese who were made to be front in that rebellion, the likes of Arthur Zaidi Ngoma, the likes of the late Professor Wamba Diawamba. And from that, after the negotiations, when the Sun City Accord were concluded, the Lusaka Accord as well as the Pretoria Accord were concluded, DRC went to election in 2006, and M23, the RCD as a whole and the rebellion did not get even 2% of the electoral vote in the North Kivu province, where they claim to have defended the population there, which is quite a very interesting. But seeing that they are going to lose a political clout based on electoral popular vote and electoral democracy in the area, in the country, they formed the CNDP of Laurent Nkunda. And they would recall that Laurent Nkunda also led a similar rebellion, claiming the same, that they are protecting Rwandophone speaking, mainly Tutsi of the Congolese descent. And one should not mix the fact that Congolese population along the borders, they share ancestry, they share culture, they share history. Whether you have both sides, Bahutu in Rwanda and Bahutu in the DRC, you have Tutsis in Rwanda and Tutsis in the DRC, and they're well known to be in different areas such as Masisi and Walikale, and on the other side, Hutus residing mostly in a zone like Ruchuru. So these are the complexity that has dictated the history of the conflict in that area. But I should mention that in any of this situation, I would say that anyone who uses ethnic mobilization and ethnicity as a basis for fighting a war is neither here or there, because that has come out clearly to be a thing of the past, even though some still roll on that ethnic mobilization to entrench their political power.
Nixon, this was going to be my next point. Exactly what does President Tshisekedi mean by calling for national mobilization against rebel insurgency in the Democratic Republic of Congo? As you've outlined, that not only is it complex, but there is, kinship against those who are fighting on opposite ends. As you talk about also the morphing of one rebel group into the other. They've fractured so many times that you have more than 100 rebel groups fighting in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So how do you make such an appeal? How do you define it?
Of course, those are the complexity of the war in DRC, and also comes along with the absence of the state institution, especially coming from a long war that have happened since 1996. And it tells you how much things are complex in that area. And mostly those 100 plus the group that you are talking about are mostly funded by different people within the region, just to further their interest and to entrench their own economic interests in order to siphon much of the resources out of eastern DRC. And this serves well as a reason why the M23 by now is fighting, because it is for economic purpose, as I have said before. It's not something that we can say that they are laying a claim on political issues that they want the DRC government to actually implement. What they are saying, that we need to be integrated in the national army, we need to be protected. But The question is who protected against what? What have you failed to get in the previous accord that were signed? You would recall that over than 1,980 Tutsi officers of the Congolese descent, so-called, they are within the National Army. And I would mention that within those Banyamulenge of Rwandan descent, there are also some differences within them. There are those who are French speakers, and mostly in Rwanda. If you go in Rwanda, they will tell you that those who come from French-speaking background are mostly marginalized by the regime of Kigali. And the question is, how does Kigali claim that they are fighting for these people, even under the ban of the M23, which we know for the fact that some of these ethnic Tutsis, mostly Banyamulenge, have categorically gone against the Kigali's wishes.
So Nixon,
the question here really is a war of economics that is happening, nothing else. And if you tell me about what is happening is something about a political claim.
So take that thinking and apply it to what message then to you use, particularly to the people of the Democratic Republic of Congo, when we look at the role, the legacy of Patrice Lumumba, whose remains have now been brought back, and reflecting on Independence Day, how to go about to achieve peace, because something's got to give.
I think the issue of the DRC is well known, a country under trauma for years from colonial era, with King Leopold massacring many of the Congolese. They talk about 10 million. And the current events that happen in that country are no different from what is happening, because I would mention that all these rebellions that are happening and continue violence are wars of dispossession, wars of resources based, and those who are behind those are well known. It's mostly in the West. You would recall that Mobutu was taken out of power because he fell out of favor with the power in Washington and London and Paris, and therefore bringing up a new person in the name of Yoweri Museveni in Uganda, and whom also brought up Kagame in this case in Rwanda. And you'd recall that the very people have been getting training, support, and advice from the very same Western government. So it's up for multinational corporations, and including the Western government, to see through. But unfortunately for the DRC as well, I cannot say that the DRC does not have a portion of the blame. We have a portion of the blame in the DRC in a way of a lack of strategic leadership, strategic capacity, and in building up the decision of the state. For instance, the army. The army, any conventional army, is built around three things. One is the idea of a doctrine of the national army. What doctrine does the Congolese National Army have? The second is around the idea of a strategic planning of the national army. The third is around the issue of command and control. Now, the DRC army is not having none of those. That's why every time there is a rebellion, the army just disintegrates, because there is no command and control, proper command and control. And if you have a country with such a lack of institutional framework that seeks to defend the population, I'm afraid that the country is going to remain in this mess. And what the president is saying, I don't think that he sees the magnitude of it, unless he's thinking of building up a national army that does not, shed off the legacy of coming from different rebellion. You'd recall that this is a national army that came from various factions of the rebellions. And for that is always the basis. Keep the DRC under a mess as you continue getting
Nixon,
the resources of that country.
We have run out of time, but it is something that we should pursue, the demobilization and disarmament campaign in the Democratic Republic of Congo and how it's reflected in other militaries across the continent. Thank you so much for speaking to us, Public African Affairs analyst and my colleague, producer at Channel Africa, Nixon Katembo, just speaking to us about what has been happening in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the root causes of the continuing insurgency and violence that has been wrought on particularly